The air on Mining Deck 7 was always thick. It wasn't just the heat from the plasma forges or the metallic dust that floated in the recycled air. It was the weight of being watched. Colonel Quark of the Kthari hegemony moved through the central walkway, his heavy steps a dull thunder on the metal grates. He was a massive being. His body was covered in a shell, a natural armor of dark, polished chitin that gleamed under the harsh work lights. Two large, multifaceted eyes took in everything with cold precision. His mouth parts, sharp and capable of slicing cable, clicked softly as he observed the workers. To him, the deck was a testament to Kthari's strength and order, maintained by lesser, softer beings. His attendants, two junior officers with less impressive shells, followed closely. They recorded his observations on data slates. The humans below barely reached Quark's midsection. They moved around in durable but simple work suits, their faces visible behind clear visors. To Quark, they looked unfinished. No shells, no natural weapons, just pink, soft skin over fragile bone. Report. Quark's voice was a deep vibration. A device on his carapace translated it into words that echoed in the human comms. A human foreman, a man named David, hurried over. Colonel, output is at 98% of quota. The new harmonic calibrators on Forge 3 are showing a 12% increase in purity. Quark did not look at David. His eyes were fixed on the humans performing tasks. They used tools for everything. Grippers for lifting, welders for sealing. They relied on machines to do what a Kthari worker could do with its own claws. It was a sign of profound weakness. They are slow, Quark stated. Their movements are inefficient. They pause. They check readings. A Kthari miner feels the rock and knows. David swallowed. They are following safety protocols, sir. The plasma is unpredictable without. Safety is for species that fear a scratch. Quark interrupted, his translator buzzing with disdain. He continued his walk, his gaze sweeping like a searchlight. His eyes landed on one human who was not moving with the nervous energy of the others. It was a woman, kneeling by a large plasma conduit junction. She had a diagnostic panel open, her fingers tapping calmly on a portable screen. Wires snaked from the screen into the conduit's access port. Her dark hair was tied back neatly. Her name on her suit read, Gina. She was focused entirely on her work, a small island of concentration in the noisy deck. Quark watched her. He saw no strength there. Her arms were thin. Her posture, while not lazy, spoke of a body built for sitting, not for labor. As he watched, the deck's artificial gravity generators experienced a minor flux. It was a common, fleeting hiccup on the anvil. For a Kthari with 4 sturdy legs and a low center of gravity, it was nothing. A slight shift, easily adjusted. For Gina, on her knees, it was a sudden lurch. The deck seemed to tilt. She threw a hand out to steady herself, her other hand yanking the wires from the port to avoid a short. She stumbled sideways, catching her weight on the conduit itself with a soft clang of her glove against metal. It was a minor thing. She was not hurt. She did not cry out. She simply took a sharp breath, righted herself, and immediately began checking her equipment for damage. But to Quark, it was confirmation. A perfect public example. He strode forward, his large form casting a shadow over her. The deck fell quiet, the humans pausing in their work. Gina looked up, her face calm but alert. She saw the massive alien colonel looming above her. Quark pointed a claw-tipped limb at her. He spoke, and his voice boomed across the deck, transmitted to every worker's helmet. Observe, he commanded. The flaw is not in the machine. It is in the flesh. He turned slightly, addressing everyone, but his eyes were on Gina. A gravity flux of 0.03 standard. A minor ripple, and this one falls. She is nearly broken by air moving the wrong way. Gina slowly stood up. She said nothing. Her brother, Min-Su, was watching from a few meters away, his hands clenched into fists. Their friend Taeyong put a warning hand on his arm. Quark's translator crackled as he delivered the judgment. This is the truth of their species. They are frail. Their bodies are weak. Their bones are hollow sticks. Their skin is like water film. They must be wrapped in suits and coddled with safety, because the universe itself is too strong for them. He looked away from Gina, as if she was no longer worth his attention, and addressed his own officers and the human foreman. From now on, the human units will have their work quotas reduced by 30%. They will be assigned only to light-duty tasks. No plasma forge operation. No heavy material hauling. Their nutrient-paced rations will be cut to match their reduced output. We cannot have them breaking under the weight of real work. He gave one last look at the humans, his gaze sweeping over their shocked and angry faces. It settled on Gina, who met his eyes with a steady, unblinking stare. There was no fear in it, no anger, just a quiet, deep observation that, for some reason, annoyed him more than shouting would have. "Mark them," he said to his attendants. "Log it. Their designation in all systems is now Frail Class Labor. Let it remind everyone of their place." With that, Colonel Quark turned and walked away, his heavy steps fading. The noise of the mining deck slowly returned, but the atmosphere was changed. A new, heavy label now hung in the air, thicker than the dust. Gina knelt back down. She plugged her wires into the conduit port again. Her hands were perfectly steady. She had a job to finish. The mess hall for human personnel was a dull, gray box. After Colonel Quark's declaration, the room felt even smaller. The mood was sour. People picked at their reduced portions of nutrient paste, a bland beige substance. The taste was always the same, but now there was less of it. Minsu slammed his fist on the table. The plastic tray jumped. "Frail. He calls us frail? I could run the plasma calibration routines in my sleep. My hands are steadier than any of their shaking claws." He was Gina's older brother, a mechanical specialist with strong shoulders and a short temper. His face was flushed with anger. "And now they cut our food? For what? For existing." Their friend Taeyong sat across from him, stirring his paste slowly. He was a reactor technician, a thinker. "They cut the food because they think we need less energy for light duty. It is their logic. Their cruel, stupid logic." Gina sat between them. She was eating her paste methodically, one small bite after another. She had her personal data pad propped against her water bulb, scrolling through schematics. "Gina," Minsu said, exasperated. "Are you even listening? He humiliated you. He humiliated all of us. And you just read." Gina looked up. Her eyes were calm. "I am listening. You are angry. You have a right to be angry. But shouting here changes nothing. The paste will still be less. The work will still be light duty. So we just take it?" Minsu hissed, keeping his voice low so the surveillance mic in the corner wouldn't pick it up. "No," Gina said softly. She turned her data pad around. On it was a complex schematic of the anvil's primary reactor core. "We do our jobs, but we do them better than they expect." She pointed a finger at a specific section of the diagram. It showed the multi-phase shielding around the reactor's heart. "Look here. The Kthari design. It is strong. Very strong against direct impact, against radiation bursts they expect." Taeyong leaned in, his anger forgotten for a moment. "Yes, it is like their own shells. Thick in one direction." Gina nodded. "Exactly. But a shell has weak points. Joins. Seams." She zoomed in. "The shielding has harmonic resonance dampeners. See? They are calibrated for Kthari alloy stress frequencies. The readings from the last 3 flare events." She pulled up another screen with graphs. "The resonance is shifting. The material is fatiguing. The dampeners are out of alignment by 0.08%. Minsu frowned, looking at the numbers. "That is tiny. Within their margin of error." "It is growing," Gina said. "Every solar cycle it increases. Their systems see it as a minor fluctuation. Their engineers, I have read their notes, they think the shielding is strong enough. They believe their own strength. They cannot imagine a failure their shells could not survive." She looked at both of them. "But physics does not care about pride. A crack starts small. A A chain fails at its weakest link, not its strongest. Taeyong understood first. His eyes widened. If a major solar flare hit, and the dampeners failed at the wrong frequency, the containment field would ripple, Gina said. It could fracture. It would not explode. It would leak. A torrent of hard radiation and plasma backflow into the conduit junctions. The color drained from Minsu's face. The anger was gone, replaced by cold fear. That would cook this side of the station. No suit would hold. Not even theirs. Gina closed the schematics. I have filed 3 maintenance reports. I flagged the harmonic calibrations. I requested a full shield integrity scan. And, Taeyong asked. And the Kthari engineering overseer dismissed them, Gina said, her voice flat. The response was logged. Concern noted. System operates within hegemony durability standards for rated threats. No action required. Priority, low. They attached a footnote. She took a slow drink of water. The footnote said, Frail class perceptions of system stress are understandably exaggerated due to biological vulnerability. Recommend psychological adjustment. Minsu looked like he might hit the table again. Gina put a hand over his. Anger is a fuel, she said quietly. But it burns fast and wild. We need a slow fire. We need to be precise. We keep working. We keep watching. We keep logging. So we wait for a disaster to prove we were right? Minsu whispered fiercely. We wait to be ready, Gina corrected him. Because when their strength fails them, they will look for someone who can see the cracks they cannot. We must be the ones who see, and we must know how to fix what they have broken. She looked back at her datapad, the reactor schematic once again glowing on the screen. The complex weave of systems was a puzzle, a dangerous one. The Kthari saw a solid wall. Gina saw the individual straining threads. She was not thinking about revenge for being called frail. She was thinking about harmonics, radiation yields, and conduit pressure thresholds. The insult was a cloud, passing and unimportant. The problem in front of her was real. It was solid, and it needed to be solved. In the quiet mess hall, with the taste of reduced rations in her mouth, Gina prepared. She studied. She modeled scenarios. Her brother fumed, and her friend worried. But Gina built a library of solutions in her mind, waiting for the moment the universe would ask a question that brute force could not answer. Colonel Kvork felt a sense of rightness when Commander Vral was near. If Kvork was the mind of Kthari authority on the anvil, Vral was its fist. Vral was a full head taller than even Kvork. His chiton was not a polished dark blue, but a matte, scarred black, marked from old battles and demonstrations of strength. His main pincers were enormous, capable of shearing through steel plate. He moved with a predator's silent grace for his size, his 4 legs placing themselves with deadly precision. He was the head of the Apex Guard, the colonel's personal security and the enforcers of his will. To Vral, the universe was brutally simple. Strength was everything. Will was expressed through physical power. Respect was born from fear. The humans, with their softness and their tools, were a mystery he had no interest in solving. They were simply weak. Today, he patrolled the engineering access corridor that led to the main reactor control room. His guards flanked him. They watched a team of humans, including Minsu, working to replace a faulty power coupling. The humans used a small loader drone and a variety of wrenches. Minsu was directing the drone, his voice calm. Easy, easy. Lower it 2 centimeters. Now line up the pins. Vral watched, his faceted eyes unblinking. The process was slow, deliberate. To him, it was agonizing. He strode forward, his heavy form causing the deck to vibrate. The humans tensed. You take all day to drop 1 piece of metal. Vral's voice grated from his translator. It was a harsh sound like rocks breaking. Minsu kept his eyes on the coupling. The alignment is sensitive, Commander. If the pins are forced, it will crack the housing. Vral made a low clicking sound, a sign of disdain. He reached out with 1 massive pincer. He did not touch the new coupling. Instead, he closed his pincer around the loader drone that held it. There was a screech of metal. The drone's casing crumpled like paper in his grip. Sparks flew. The drone's motors whined and died. It dropped the heavy coupling with a loud crash onto the deck, just missing Minsu's foot. Vral tossed the destroyed drone aside, clattered against the wall. Your tools are frail. Like you. He pointed a sharp limb at the coupling on the floor. Now, pick it up. Use the strength your species lacks. Prove you are not useless. Minsu's face was pale, but a hot anger burned in his eyes. He looked at the heavy component. He could not lift it alone. It was a task for machinery or a team. This is not efficient, Minsu said, his voice tight. Efficiency. Vral's translator buzzed. This is discipline. A strong being does not hide behind machines. A strong being is the tool. He took a step closer, looming over Minsu. The smell of ozone and chitin filled the air. Pick up. 2 other human workers moved to help Minsu. Vral's other pincer snapped out, barring their way. Only him. Let the frail one show his quality. Minsu knelt. He got his fingers under the edge of the coupling. He strained, his back and arms tightening. The coupling shifted slightly, scraping on the deck, but it did not lift. A vein stood out on his forehead. Vral watched, utterly still. It was a lesson, a demonstration of the natural order. He was not being cruel in his mind. He was simply revealing a truth, as one might peel a shell to show the soft creature inside. After a long moment of straining, Minsu sat back, breathing hard. Vral made that clicking sound again. He reached down. With one smooth, powerful motion, he speared his primary pincer through a handle on the coupling and lifted it. He held the heavy piece of machinery in the air as if it weighed nothing. He held it right in front of Minsu's face. This is weight. This is reality. Your mind, your alignment, he said, shaking the coupling slightly. It means nothing if you cannot move the world with your own body. He then turned and slammed the coupling into place on the housing. The crash was tremendous. The housing cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading from the impact site. The pins bent, shearing off. Vral looked at his work. The coupling was seated, but it was broken. The housing was ruined. It is installed. It will hold. Because I will it to hold. He turned his dark eyes back to Minsu. Your way would have taken an hour. Mine took a moment. That is strength. He leaned in close, his translator dropping to a low, menacing buzz. Remember your place, frail thing. Your ideas are whispers. My strength is a law. With that, he turned and walked away, his guards following. The humans were left with the shattered housing, the broken coupling, and a repair job that was now 10 times harder. Minsu stared at the wreckage, his hands still shaking from the effort and the fury. The message was clear. In Vral's world, the only truth was force. The only answer was power. Delicate skill was an illusion. Careful work was a weakness. From a service hatch further down the corridor, Gina had watched the entire exchange. She had been running a diagnostic cable. She said nothing. She made no sound. Her face was like stone. She watched Vral walk away, a creature of pure, brutal certainty. She looked at her brother's humiliated, furious back. And then her eyes went to the cracked housing. She saw not just the damage but the cause, the uncontrolled force, the disregard for system integrity. It was the same blind arrogance that ignored her resonance reports. A being like Vral would never fear a reactor breach, because he believed his shell could withstand anything the universe could throw at him. He was, in his own mind, invincible. Gina turned back to her diagnostic panel. On the screen, the numbers for the reactor shielding's harmonic instability continued their slow, steady climb. She logged another observation. The law of force was about to meet a different, older set of laws. And physics, she knew, never negotiated. The alarm was not a sound. It was a feeling. A deep, subsonic shudder that went through the deck plates and into the bones of everyone on board. It was followed a second later by a screaming klaxon and flashing crimson lights. On the command deck, Colonel Quark felt the vibration in his legs. He turned from a strategic display. Report. A Kthari officer snapped his pincers over his console. Massive solar flare. Kernel. Unpredicted magnitude. Impact in 15 seconds on our sector. Standard shielding protocols. Quark ordered, his voice calm. This was a known hazard. The Anvil's shields had weathered such storms before. Engaging now, the officer replied. Through the thick viewport, the stars seemed to waver. Then a wave of silent, furious light washed over the station. The world outside turned a blinding, angry white. The lights on the command deck flickered. The shutter became a violent shake. Console sparked. Shield integrity? Quark demanded. The officer's clicking sounds became rapid, confused. The primary barrier held, but secondary harmonic dampeners in reactor shielding. They are not responding. Resonance cascade is building. Quark's mind flashed to the human engineer's reports. The ones about harmonic calibrations. The ones he had dismissed as Frail-class fear. A cold spike, alien to his kind, shot through him. Override. Stabilize it. Trying. The system is not accepting commands. The feedback loop is too rapid. On the mining decks, chaos erupted. The gravity fluctuated wildly, throwing tools and humans alike. Lights failed, plunging sections into emergency gloom filled with strobing red. Panic shouts filled the comms. But in a small workshop, Gina, Min-Soo, and Tae-young were already moving. Their workstations had gone dark, but a single portable lamp cast long shadows. Gina's personal datapad was still alive, its screen showing a frantic, real-time schematic of the reactor core. The shield integrity graph was a sheer cliff, plummeting toward zero. "It's the cascade," Gina said, her voice cutting through the alarm. "The dampeners failed. The field is ripping itself apart. Radiation levels in the lower conduit halls are spiking," Tae-young said, reading from a handheld scanner. "It's coming this way." On the command deck, Quark watched a horror unfold on his monitor. A section of the reactor shielding, stressed beyond its design, glowed a malevolent orange on the thermal scan. A containment field fracture was imminent. If it blew, it would flood the central spine of the anvil with death. "Seal the blast doors to the reactor conduit halls. Manual override," he roared. "Contain the breach." The order went out. In the lower halls, massive doors, a meter thick, began to grind shut. Their purpose was to seal off sections in case of a fire or decompression. In Hall 7, Commander Vraal was leading a team of Apex guards to evacuate personnel. He was in his element. Crisis was a test of strength, and he would pass. He herded a group of terrified Kthari technicians toward safety. Then he saw it. Blast door 7 Alpha was closing, but a conduit had snapped from its housing in the quake. It was bent, jamming the door's track. The door was stuck, 3/4 closed. A gap remained. Through that gap, Vraal could see the hellish glow from the reactor junction beyond. He could also see a human maintenance worker, trapped on the other side, pounding on the door. "Commander!" The radiation. One of his guards buzzed, his scanner screaming a warning. Vraal assessed. The door was jammed. The weak human would die. It was regrettable but natural. The strong survived. His duty was to his own. He began to turn. Then Colonel Quark's voice snarled in his calm, "Vraal, that door must seal. If that breach is not contained, we lose the command deck. Close it." The order changed everything. This was not about saving a frail life. This was about protecting the strong, about obeying his colonel. This was a direct test of his power. "I will close it," Vraal stated. He marched toward the glowing gap. The heat was immense, washing over him in waves. The air shimmered. He ignored it. His shell had withstood the vacuum of space, ship-to-ship projectile fire. Energy was just another force to overcome. He reached the door. He planted his forelegs wide, bracing himself. He slid his 2 primary pincers into the gap above the bent conduit. The metal of the door was hot enough to make his chitin sizzle. He did not flinch. With a roar that echoed in the hall, he pushed. His immense muscles corded. The door, designed to be moved by motors, groaned. It shifted a centimeter. Then another. The bent conduit screamed as it was crushed further. On the other side, The trapped humans scrambled back from the shrinking gap, finding a small service hatch and fleeing. Vral saw the movement. Good. The weak thing was gone. Now it was just him and the obstacle. He pushed harder. The heat was becoming pain. A deep, burning sensation he had never felt before. His shell, perfect against kinetic force, was not designed for this sustained, concentrated thermal and radiative assault. It was not an impact. It was an immersion. A hairline crack appeared on his left pincer, glowing from within. He felt it. A new sensation. A giving way. He roared again, pushing with everything he had. The door slammed the final few centimeters into the frame with a final, thunderous boom. The seal was complete. Vral stood before the sealed door, victorious. He turned to report to the colonel. As he turned, the crack in his pincer spread with a sound like ice breaking. It raced up his limb, across his shoulder carapace, and down his thorax. The superheated, radioactive plasma behind the door had done its work, weakening the molecular bonds of his natural armor. He looked down at his chest. A web of glowing lines appeared. He took a step, and his body, the apex of Kthari physical strength, began to come apart. It was not an explosion. It was a terrible, slow shattering. Pieces of his black chitin fell away, hitting the deck with sharp cracks, revealing soft, burning tissue beneath. The pain was absolute, all-consuming. It was a pain his philosophy had never accounted for. Commander Vral did not simply fall. He broke, and as he broke, he screamed. It was a high, raw, animal sound of utter agony and profound shock. It was the sound of absolute certainty dying. The scream ripped through every comm channel on the anvil, a noise that silenced all other chaos for one terrible moment. On the command deck, Colonel Quark heard it. He knew the voice. He stood frozen, listening to his apex guard, the embodiment of strength, die not in battle, but in a slow, unraveling scream of helplessness. The sound filled the silent command deck, and Quark's many eyes were fixed on the monitor showing the sealed, scorched door behind which his strongest warrior had just been unmade. The scream died, leaving a ringing silence in the comms that was worse than the alarms. On the command deck, Colonel Quark was statue still. The sound of Vral's end played over in his mind. It was impossible. It defied the natural order. Around him, his officers were clicking in panic. Containment field degradation at 40% and falling. Radiation flooding conduit halls 8 through 12. Primary reactor core is approaching emergency shutdown threshold. Shutdown. It meant the death of the anvil. Life support, gravity, everything would run on backups for a few hours, then fail. They would all suffocate in the dark, cold metal tomb. We must evacuate. A junior officer buzzed, his shell trembling. Abandon the core. Quark watched the screens. The disaster was a flood, and they were trying to stop it with their bare claws. Their strength was useless. A deep, chilling realization was forming in his mind. The humans' report had been right. The weakness had been in their system, a weakness their pride had blinded them to. Colonel, the officer insisted. Quark did not answer. His eyes were fixed on a secondary monitor. It showed a feed from a maintenance camera in a service corridor near the reactor. Small figures in human work suits were moving, not towards the escape pods. They were moving toward the core. Gina. The word surfaced in his mind. The frail one from the deck. She was leading 2 others. They carried tool packs, not survival gear. In the workshop, the light from Gina's datapad lit her face from below. The schematic was a mess of red warnings. The automatic systems are fried, she said, her voice remarkably steady. The cascade will trigger a full core quarantine in 6 minutes. That's the point of no return. Minsu was stuffing tools into a belt. So we run. We get to a pod. It's what they're doing. Gina looked at him. The pods are for Kthari first. You know the protocol. And even if we get off, the core breach will destroy the anvil. Hundreds are still on board. Our team is in Sector 9. Taeyong checked a radiation scanner. The main access corridors are already hot. Lethal dose in 3 minutes of exposure. We don't take the main corridors, Gina said. She zoomed in on her schematic. A faint, blue web of lines appeared behind the major red conduits. Service crawlways. For maintenance bots. They're narrow, shielded. Radiation levels will be high, but not immediate. We have maybe 20 minutes before it gets through. Minsu stared at the tiny tunnels on the screen. We can't even stand up in those. And our suits will get stuck. We take them off, Gina said simply. In the crawlway antechamber. We go in our undersuits. Less bulk. We move faster. You're crazy, Minsu snapped. The heat alone. Is it crazier than dying in a pod bay waiting for permission we won't get? Gina's eyes were hard. Or dying when the core goes. The crawlways lead to the primary dampener control nexus. If we can manually reset the harmonic sequence and reroute power through the secondary buffer, we can stabilize the field. I can do the reset, but I need you two to reroute the plasma flow. It's a three-person job. It has to be done by hand. She looked from her brother to her friend. They believe strength is about withstanding force. Our strength is different. It is about fitting into the small spaces. About using fingers for what claws cannot do. About enduring what we must to fix the problem. Taeyong took a deep breath and nodded. Minsu, after a long second, swore under his breath and grabbed a laser welder. Fine, but you buy the drinks after. They moved. They left their bulky work suits in the antechamber, entering the crawlway in thin, gray thermal undersuits, helmets, and oxygen units. The space was tight. They had to crawl on hands and knees. Wires and coolant pipes brushed against their backs. The distant shudder of the dying station vibrated through the metal around them. The heat was stifling. Radiation warnings chimed softly on their wrist units, the numbers climbing steadily. They did not speak. They saved their breath. Gina led, her data pad in a sealed pouch, pulled along the floor in front of her. On the command deck, Quark watched the tiny camera feed. He saw the humans enter the crawlway. He saw them vanish into the guts of his station, into the veins where no Kthari could ever go. They were too big, their shells too wide. It was a path only for the small, the flexible, the frail. He felt a jumble of alien emotions. Disbelief, a flicker of shame, a desperate, clawing hope. He ordered all remaining power to life support in their sector. He silenced the alarms on their path. He gave them the only help he could, clear signals. They crawled for what felt like years. The air grew hotter. Minsu's breathing was ragged over the comms. Taeyong muttered calculations for the plasma reroute. Then Gina stopped. Here. A small access hatch, barely a meter wide. She punched in a code. It hissed open, revealing a tiny room filled with glowing control crystals and shimmering energy conduits. The heart of the dampener system. The air hummed with unstable power. They spilled into the room. Gina went straight to the main console, her fingers flying across the interface, pulling up the shattered harmonic sequence. Minsu and Taeyong scrambled to a wall of plasma conduits, their hands moving quickly, connecting and disconnecting flow regulators with a delicate precision Vralus crushing pincers could never have managed. Gina worked. She rebuilt the sequence, line by line, her mind holding the complex pattern she had studied for weeks. She was not forcing anything. She was persuading. She was aligning. Her fingers, small and deft, danced over the controls. Outside, the station held its breath. The flood of death paused at the edge of the cracked dam, waiting to see if the tiny, frail creatures in its heart could weave it back together. The hum in the control nexus shifted from a sickly waver to a low, steady thrum. A crystal on the main console, which had been flashing a frantic red, pulsed once more and then glowed a solid, calm blue. Dampener sequence reinitialized, Gina said, her voice hoarse. She leaned heavily on the console. Field stabilization in progress. At the conduit wall, Minsu twisted a final regulator. Plasma flow is rerouted. It's using the secondary buffer. Pressure is dropping. Taeyong watched his scanner. Radiation levels in the primary halls are plateauing. The leak is contained. It's working. For a moment, the three of them just breathed in the hot, metallic air. The trembling of the deck plates softened, becoming the familiar, distant vibration of a functioning station. The only sound was the hum of the systems they had just saved. They were exhausted. Their thin undersuits were soaked with sweat. The numbers on their wrist dosimeters were high, too high, but they were no longer climbing. They made their way back through the service crawlway. Felt longer going back. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only aching muscles and a deep fatigue. When they emerged into the antechamber, they pulled on their heavier work suits with slow, clumsy movements. The main corridor outside was a scene of quiet ruin. Smoke hung in the air. Scorch marks blackened the walls where energy had arced. The massive blast door Vraal had sealed stood dark and scarred. As they walked slowly down the corridor, a group of Kthari appeared from the other end. They moved with less certainty than usual. In the center was Colonel Kvork. He stopped a few meters from the humans. His officers hung back. The difference in size was still immense. He towered over Gina. His shell was still polished, unmarked by the crisis. But something in his posture was different. He was utterly still, not with authority but with a kind of frozen assessment. His multifaceted eyes looked at them. He saw their stained undersuits, their tired faces, the tools still clutched in Minsu's hands. He looked past them, down the corridor to the sealed door. The silence stretched. Finally, Kvork spoke. His translator voice was lower, stripped of its booming command. "The reactor is stable," he said. It was not a question. Gina nodded. "Yes, the containment field is re-established. The core is safe." Kvork's gaze settled on her. He looked at her hands. Small, human. The hands that had just reassembled a broken system in the heart of a storm. "The crawlways," he said. "My people could not go there. Our forms are not made for such spaces." "No," Gina agreed quietly. "They are not." Kvork took a single step forward. Not a threatening move, but one of strange, awkward proximity. He was looking at the human not as a category, not as Frail class, but as a specific individual being who had done an impossible thing. "Commander Vraal sealed that door," Kvork stated, his voice a rough buzz. "He used his strength. It was the only way he knew." Gina followed his gaze to the door. She could see the deep gouges in the metal from his pincers. She could imagine the heat, the pain. "He was very strong," she said. It was a simple truth. "He is dead," Kvork said, the finality harsh in the air. His strength was not enough. It was the wrong kind of strength for this enemy. He paused, his internal processes struggling. "Your reports, the harmonic flaws. You were correct." Gina did not say, "I told you so." She simply waited. "We believed," Kvork continued, the words seeming to come from a deep, uncomfortable place, "that a strong shell was the highest form of resilience, that what could not be broken by force was therefore perfect. We believed your fragility made you blind to true power." He looked from the door back to her. "We were wrong. Your bodies are fragile. They can be broken by a fall, by a change in the air." He seemed to be truly seeing it for the first time, not as a flaw but as a fact. "But you do not define your strength by your shell. You have no shell, so your strength is elsewhere." He gestured vaguely toward the crawlway hatch. "It is in going into the dark, hot places where we cannot follow. It is in using your minds to see cracks before they break. It is in enduring the leak, knowing you are being wounded, to stop the flood for everyone else." He fell silent, the hum of the station filling the space his words had left. "It is just a different way to survive," Gina said softly. "No," Kvork said, the translator clicking firmly. "It is not. Survival is what the weakest creature seeks. What you did was not mere survival. It was mastery of a situation that mastered us." He straightened slightly, a commander again, but the old arrogance was gone, burned away. "The designations will be removed. The work and ration restrictions are ended. Your species classification will be reviewed." He didn't apologize. For a Kthari, what he had just said was deeper than an apology. It was a restructuring of reality. He gave her one last, long look at the frail, resilient, powerful creature before him. then turned and walked away, his officers falling into step behind him, their clicks subdued. Min-Su let out a long, shaky breath. What was that? Gina watched the colonel go. That, she said, was the sound of a worldview breaking. She turned, her body aching with exhaustion. Let's go. I need some real food. The human mess hall no longer felt like a cage. The air still smelled of recycled oxygen and cleaner, but the tension was gone. The weight of the label had been lifted. People talked in normal voices. They ate without looking over their shoulders. At a corner table, Gina, Min-Su, and Tae-young sat together. They were clean, wearing fresh, simple clothes. Their skin was pale from the medical decontamination scrubs, and they moved a little slowly, still tired deep in their bones. But they were calm. On the table between them were not the usual trays of nutrient paste. Instead, there was a small, insulated container from their personal supplies. Min-Su opened it. Inside, carefully wrapped, were rolls of gimbap. The rice was a little compressed from storage, and the seaweed was not as crisp as it would be fresh. But the bright colors of the carrot, spinach, and egg strips were a vivid contrast to the gray room. Tae-young smiled. It was a small, real smile. I thought the radiation might have cooked it. It would taste better than the paste, Min-Su grumbled. But he was already handing a roll to Gina. She took it. The familiar feel of it in her hand was a comfort. It was a piece of home, of a world with oceans and sunlight, far from the metal and plasma of the anvil. They ate in quiet companionship for a while. The simple flavors were a deep relief after days of emergency rations and the bland paste. So, Min-Su said after swallowing a bite, we're not Frail class anymore. What does that mean tomorrow? It means we go back to our real jobs, Gina said, picking a grain of rice from her sleeve. Full shifts, full access, probably more work, not less. They will want the reactors checked completely. Tae-young nodded. I already have a list. Every dampener, every conduit junction. It will take weeks. But it will be our work, Gina said. Done our way. No one will smash a loader drone to make a point. Min-Su thought about Commander Vral. The memory of the screaming was still sharp in his mind. He really believed his own shell was enough. He died believing it. He was wrong, Tae-young said softly. The universe is bigger than any one kind of strength. Gina looked at her half-eaten roll. His strength was real. It just had limits. Our fragility is real, too. It also has limits. We just learn to live in different parts of the same dangerous universe. She thought of Colonel Kvork's face in the corridor. The stunned, shattered look in his many eyes as he tried to fit a new truth into an old mind. He had not thanked her. He had not praised her. But he had seen her. He had seen all of them not as a weak species but as a different one. For a being like him, that was a revolution. On the command deck, Colonel Kvork was alone at his station. The screens showed normal operations. The reactor core glowed a steady, safe green. The logs were open. He was reading, for the third time, the maintenance reports Gina had filed. The precise language. The clear data. The warnings he had dismissed with a note about Frail class perception. He closed the files. He looked out the viewport at the stars. They were constant, uncaring. They did not judge strength or frailty. They simply existed, and you had to find a way to live among them. His old way had been to be a wall, to be hard, to be unbreakable. Vral had been the perfect piece of that wall. And the universe, with a silent surge of energy, had reduced that perfect piece to screaming ash. It had not fought strength with greater strength. It had used a different rule entirely. The humans were not walls. They were something else. They were like water, finding the tiny crack, flowing through, patiently wearing away the obstacle, or in this case, healing it from the inside. They endured what a wall could not. A wall stood until it fell. Water just kept flowing. He keyed a command into his console. He changed the official designation for the human contractors. He erased Frail class labor. In its place, he input a new provisional classification. It was not a Kthari word, but a term from a human language database his translator suggested. It read, Adaptive class technicians. It was not an embrace. It was not friendship. It was a cold, clinical recognition of a capability he could no longer deny. It was the first grudging step into a wider, more complicated galaxy than he had known. Back in the mess hall, the three friends finished their meal. It was a small thing, just shared food among comrades after a hard day's work. But in its own way, it was as much a victory as stabilizing the core. They had not won by becoming stronger than the Kthari. They had won by being exactly what they were: clever, resilient, and stubborn. They had fixed the problem with the tools they had: their minds, their hands, and their willingness to crawl into the dark. Gina looked at her brother and her friend. They were alive. The station was intact. The work was waiting. "Come on," she said, gathering the wrappers. "We have a lot of scans to run tomorrow." They stood up and left the mess hall, walking back to their quarters. Their steps were tired, but they walked without a weight on their backs. They were not frail. They were just human. And on that day, in the silent metal halls of the Anvil, that was more than enough.